Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. We've gotten the top 10 best movies of 2023. Now let's talk about the worst. Now, I actively avoid movies that I think I'm gonna hate, so I don't have 10 movies that I absolutely hated enough to put here, so I'm just doing my top 5 least favorite movies of 2023. Call me crazy, but I don't want to waste my time with a movie that I know I'm gonna hate or I've heard that everyone else has hated, so I don't have that many movies that I don't like. Alright, let's go ahead and get started with number 5. Number 5 was a movie that was released very early in 2023, and I was going into it expecting campy fun, and it certainly had plenty of elements of that, but maybe it just wasn't my taste. I was not a fan of Cocaine Bear. Cocaine Bear, it had plenty of scenes in there that were just stupid fun, but for me, it was just too much for me. Certain scenes got super gory, and that's just not really my thing. I understand that there are people that really like this movie for what it is, but you know what? It just was not for me, or did not hit on the right day. It was not my kind of thing. But at number 4 is a movie that made a lot of money for its budget, but just wasn't a good movie. Five Nights at Freddy's is confusing to me because it was day and date release with Paramount Plus, which normally means that it's not going to make a lot of money and it isn't very good. Turns out that only half of those things are true. It's not very good, but it ended up making like $300 million off of a budget of like 10 million or something. That's ridiculous. It's done so well that they are actively writing and going to start filming and release a sequel in the next 7 months, which is an insane turnaround. Now, don't get me wrong, there were elements of this movie that worked for me. I thought the beginning was interesting enough, the whole element of Josh Hutcherson getting this job and something weird is happening. All of that was fine with me, but the movie got completely off the rails whenever it just tried to do too much in the second half. It just didn't all come together for me, but it does have enough promise in there where if they were to, piece together a sequel, maybe it could be good. If it's a 7-month turnaround, I don't have a lot of faith for that script. So, we'll see what the sequel has to offer, but it was my 4th least favorite movie of 2023. Okay, number 3 is one of the biggest flops of the year. Fast X came out and I did not like it. It's another movie that I expected to just be stupid fun, but this franchise has gone completely off the rails. I have a full review of it on my channel if you want to check it out. This movie came out and it was just so stupid. At this point, it feels like a campy remake of the Fast and Furious franchise. I don't know what happened to this thing. And not only did they make a bad movie, but they made a bad movie with a $300 million price tag. And for me, I don't see it on the screen anywhere. It seems like that they just paid their cast a ton of money. For some reason, Brie Larson is in this movie, and really her character has no business being there. Jason Momoa is for sure the best part of this movie because he understands what it is, but meanwhile you have Vin Diesel out there taking everything way too seriously in a Fast and Furious movie where they're gonna helicopter in, or I guess airplane in, his car and just dump it on top of 2 others and expect it to keep running. It's like, dude, pick a lane. But then the fight for number 1, number 2 was very close for me. But ultimately, I went with You People at number 2. It was a Netflix comedy released in January. So, like a full year since. But I just remember watching this. And it did the one type of comedy that I don't like. And everything was just so mean-spirited. Like, mean-spirited comedies, like, it can work as an element in comedy. But everything in this movie, I just felt like the characters were unlikable, especially Eddie Murphy. They have good talent here, but they did not appropriately use everybody. I just found myself not liking any of the characters. The jokes weren't funny, and it was a waste of time at the end of the day. Total and complete misuse of talent in a movie, which is the exact same thing I could say about my number 1 film, and this is going to be controversial, Beau is Afraid. I don't walk out of movies. I just don't. But I walked out of Beau is Afraid whenever it got to the finale of the movie. This movie, I understand that there are people saying that it's deep, and it does have like deep elements, I guess. Like, for those of you that love this movie, you're going to say that I don't get it. And I promise you, I get the movie. I understand what the movie's about. I've seen it. I've seen tons of movies. I understand what this movie is. But just because you're going for weird doesn't mean you get to make like a Picasso type of movie and expect us to just sit through it. There's so much random stuff that happens here. They didn't make a coherent film. They didn't make a film that was enjoyable. They made a movie that wasted Joaquin Phoenix's performance, which I actually thought was rather good. They wasted Ari Aster, who is a very promising director. This guy directed some awesome horror movies in Midsommar and Hereditary. What on earth is this thing? I remember certain scenes so well because I was sitting there in the theater horrified at what they were doing. Like, what was this thing? And by the time they got to a stadium scene, I had just had enough. This movie had been jerking us around all night, and I could not take it anymore. I stood up and did something that I never do. I left the movie theater because I was just done. And apparently there was like a few minutes left. So I stayed there for basically the entire thing. I got the gist of it. I did think that there were interesting things in the movie, but all of it was completely wasted for side gags, weird humor stuff, gross out scenes, and a story that was just too complicated for its own good. And Beau's Afraid ultimately became my least favorite movie of 2023 because it's the only movie that I walked out of. Okay, well, that was my least favorite movies of 2023 list, and this honestly wasn't that fun to film, so if you like to consider subscribing today and make this kind of worth it, thank you guys so much for watching it, and I'll see you next time. Bye, y'all.